Chapter 5. The First Murder. When he woke up, Bruno felt better. His mind was clear, he felt happy, and he was hungry. After a good dinner, he read the notes about Miriam. What did she look like? She had red hair, was a little fat, and she was pregnant. The dirty little... Bruno thought. He hated her. Guy would be happy without an animal like that in his life. Everything was so good. I have a friend, and my life has a real purpose, Bruno thought. I'd do anything for Guy. When the train arrived at Metcalfe Station, Bruno looked for Miriam's address in the telephone book. Miriam's family name was Joyce, and she lived with her parents. There were 7 people called Joyce in the book. One was a Mrs. M. Joyce. Perhaps that was Miriam's mother, and she was called Miriam too? Bruno took a taxi to the address, 1253 Magnolia Street, and arrived at 9 o'clock. It looked poor and ugly, the kind of place where Miriam would live. Bruno waited by a tree near the house. After a long time, 2 men and a woman came out. The woman had red hair and a square, big body. One of the men had red hair, too. Her brother? They got in a car and drove away. Bruno ran fast for a taxi. He never ran, and it made him ill. He found a taxi and got in. "Go! Go!" he shouted at the driver. He could see the car in front of them. "Right! Turn right now!" "Where are you going?" the driver asked. "Perhaps I know the place." "Shut your mouth and drive!" Bruno screamed. The driver was annoyed and shook his head, but he followed the car. Eventually, the car stopped in front of a big sign with lights. It said, Lake Metcalfe's Land of Entertainment. There were music and lights and people laughing. An amusement park. Bruno smiled. This was perfect. He followed the woman and her friends through the park. Was she really Miriam? She was quite fat, and her hair was red. Bruno noticed that she wore red socks with red shoes. Ugly. But this woman wasn't pregnant. Then one of the men said, "Miriam, do you want some ice cream?" "Oh, yes," she said. It was her. "You've got 10 minutes to live, and you're pushing ice cream into your mouth," Bruno thought. "Pig!" Miriam and her friends ran off laughing. They went on lots of different rides. They went round and up and down. Miriam held her brother's hand, and then the other man's hand. She kissed him. Bruno hated her soft, fat face and her stupid laugh. And what was she kissing these men for? They all took a boat to an island in the middle of the Lake Metcalfe, and Bruno followed in another boat. The island was dark and quiet. There were a lot of trees. People came here to kiss and make love. Why were the 3 of them here? "Let's sit down," one of the men said. "I'll look for a place down here." The other man went with him. It was dark, and Bruno saw Miriam's shadow alone against the water. Bruno moved quietly, and he was there next to her. "Hello," he whispered. "Isn't your name Miriam?" She turned. "Yeah? Who are—" His hands closed round Miriam's throat, and he pressed tighter and tighter. She couldn't scream. Bruno pushed her backwards, and she fell over his leg to the ground. He pressed his hands into her throat more and more. Her skin was very hot. Her head turned from side to side, her lips opened, and her teeth came forward. "Sssss," she said. "Sssss." Her throat was very fat. Bruno pressed her into the earth. She was very hot. It was like killing a hot little rat. He took his hands from her throat. Suddenly Miriam coughed, and Bruno jumped on her again and pressed her throat. He wanted her to die. Miriam was silent, and Bruno took his hands away. He ran down to his boat and went back over the water to the park. "Help! Help!" Bruno heard the men shouting. "My God, she's dead! Help!" Bruno walked slowly out of the park. He needed a drink and went into a place that looked like a bar. "Whiskey," he said. "We don't sell drink here, son," the man said. "But I need a drink," Bruno shouted. "I don't have any whiskey," the man said. "Coffee?" Bruno left and ran to the station. He suddenly knew what he really wanted. A woman. He wanted a woman. He was very excited. He asked a taxi driver where to go. The man wrote an address on one of his cards. Bruno ran off, and the taxi driver watched him until he turned a corner. Chapter 6. Bruno Did It. Guy sat back against his bed in the hotel and watched Anne turn over his drawings of their house. He kissed her hair and then her face. "I want it to be a big house," Anne said. "Yes," Guy said. He had the job in Florida again, which would bring him a lot of money, and then there would be more valuable jobs. He was very happy. "Are you hungry?" Anne asked. "Let's order some food." As they ate, the phone rang. "Guy?" It was his mother. "Hello, Mama," he said. "Guy," she said, "it's about Miriam. She's dead, Guy. Murdered last night." She started to cry. Guy put the phone down and told Anne about Miriam. He started to pack his suitcase while Anne ordered his plane ticket. "Guy, are you all right?" Anne asked. Guy was staring at his drawings, but there were no houses on the paper. They were all drawings of Bruno's smiling face, with his red, tired eyes. What if Bruno did it? Guy thought on the plane. He tried to remember every word they had said. Did I tell him to do it? At Metcalf, the police asked him some questions, and then Guy went home to his mother. He found a letter waiting for him. Inside was a card from a Metcalf taxi company, and on the other side, some writing. "Nice town, Metcalf." That doesn't mean anything, Guy told himself. It could be anyone. Lots of people come to Metcalf. At the inquest, a lawyer asked Guy about Miriam. "You wanted her dead, didn't you?" the lawyer said. "You arranged her murder. You thought she wouldn't give you a divorce, and you didn't want her to go to Florida. Isn't that true?" "Yes, but I didn't want her dead," Guy said. He looked at Miriam's boyfriend, Owen Markham. He was a dark, good-looking man who looked at Guy with large brown eyes. In the end, the inquest decided that some unknown person had murdered Miriam. The next day, a telegram from Bruno arrived. "All good wishes from the Golden West." "It's from Anne's parents," Guy told his mother. "It's nothing, nothing." A few days later, Guy went to Florida to start his new job. Every day he worked, he felt good. He knew he was doing the right thing. The sports club would be a perfect building. One evening in August, he got a letter from Bruno. "I phoned your mother for your address, but she didn't give it to me. Look, Guy, don't worry. I'm going to be very careful. Write to me soon. Your friend, Charlie Bruno." Then Guy knew. Bruno did it. Bruno did it. He could not stop thinking those words. Bruno did it. His life was different now. His job, his mother, Anne, everything was different now. When Guy spoke to his mother on the phone, he said, "Do you remember that man who phoned you for my address? It was a friend, Phil Johnson. He works in Chicago and he wanted to see me. Isn't that nice? Don't worry about it." Chapter 7. No One to Talk to. "Charlie, who are all these people?" Bruno's mother looked at the stories about Miriam's murder and the photographs of Guy that Bruno had cut out of the newspapers. "I met Guy Haines on a train," Bruno said. He liked saying Guy's name, and he wanted to talk about the murder. Someone murdered his wife. "Who did it?" she asked. "They don't know. It's a very difficult murder, a clever one, I think," Bruno said. "You know, Ma, Guy was the nicest man I ever met, but his wife was a—" "Charlie," his mother said, "you're in your grandmother's house, and she doesn't like bad language." She looked at the glass of whiskey in his hand. "Oh, Charlie, you haven't had breakfast yet." "Whiskey's good for me, Ma." "Don't drink too much," she said. "Come out later. You're in California, and the sun is out. It's a beautiful day." But the whiskey wasn't good for him. Every morning he had a pain in his chest and he couldn't breathe. When his mother left, Bruno thought about the murder. He felt so powerful. He took away life, like God. He wanted to tell everyone about the murder, about his one great act. Most people, ordinary, common people, never had one great thing in their lives. "The newspapers," he thought. "I could tell them all about murder. I could teach them." Bruno really wanted to talk to Guy about the murder, but he did not dare to phone or write to him yet. But he had to talk to Guy soon. He wanted his father dead quickly, and he wanted Guy to do it. Bruno's grandmother walked into the room. "Have breakfast with me, my dear," she said. "Then I want to go out. A film, perhaps. A good one with a murder in it. Or an amusement park?" "An amusement park," Bruno said with a smile. "I like them." When they got back to the house in the afternoon, there was a letter for Bruno. "Dear Charles, I don't understand your letter. I don't know you very well, so please don't phone or write to me or my mother again. Guy Haines." Bruno felt the terrible pain in his chest that he got in the mornings, and then he started to cry. Chapter 8. Bruno is Everywhere. A few months later, in December, Guy sat in his office in New York. He was not getting any offers of jobs, and he felt that his guilt about Miriam's murder kept people away from him. A man needed to be pure inside to draw plans for a good building, and Guy felt dirty. He was making drawings of the house for him and Anne to live in after their wedding, when the telephone rang. "Hello, Guy. It's Bruno." Guy said nothing and put the phone down, but it rang again. "I want to see you, Guy," Bruno said. "No," Guy said and put the phone down. That night he and Anne came out of his flat, and Bruno was standing there in the dark. Guy held Anne's hand and tried to keep calm. "Hello, Guy," Bruno said softly. He looked at Anne with great interest, as if he was surprised to see Guy with a woman. "We must go. We must go," Guy said and walked away quickly, with Anne's hand still in his. "Oh, Guy, I just want to—" Bruno said. "Who was that?" Anne asked. "A man I know. He wants a job," Guy said. "It's nothing." What does Bruno want? Guy thought. What does he want? The question did not go away, and Guy could not stop thinking. One morning in January, Bruno appeared next to Guy in the street and said, "Have a drink with me, Guy." "No." "Yes," Bruno said. "What are you frightened of?" "Nothing," Guy said. "Do I seem frightened?" Get the police, Guy thought. The police, now. But he couldn't. "Then have a drink with me," Bruno said. Guy agreed to go to a bar. "Why didn't you tell me about Anne?" Bruno asked. "That woman I see you with. I know all about her." "This is our last meeting," Guy said. "I'm going to tell the police about you." "Why didn't you do that last year?" Bruno smiled. "I'll tell them you paid me to kill Miriam. Tell them you went to Mexico so I could do it alone. They'll believe me, Guy." Guy knew this was true. He said, "I have to go." "Wait," Bruno said. "You're going to kill my father." Guy looked into Bruno's eyes. They were the eyes of a mad child. Guy felt helpless. He could do nothing. "I'll go to the police if you don't kill him," Bruno said. Then he left the bar suddenly. Over the next 2 weeks, Guy saw Bruno standing outside his office every evening when he left. Then the first letter came. It was a map of Bruno's house with a written plan for the murder. Guy threw it away, but the letters came every 2 or 3 days. The 21st letter said, "Do you want me to tell Anne about your part in Miriam's murder? You must kill my father soon, before the middle of March." Then Bruno sent a big gun. Everything seemed like part of a bad play or film. Guy looked at his own gun. He had bought it when he was 15, because it was small and beautiful and perfect. He held the gun gently, and he smiled and thought about when he was a boy. Guy spent the next day with Anne in the country, and they went to look at their house. "It'll be finished by March," Guy said. "That's good," Anne said. "There'll be 2 months before we get married to buy things for it." "Do you know what—" Guy began to say. Then he stopped and looked at Anne from the sides of his eyes. He wanted to tell her about Bruno's letters and the gun, but he couldn't. He didn't want any secrets from Anne, but here was the biggest secret of all. Suddenly Guy realized that his life was separating into 2 parts, a life with Anne and a life with Bruno. They went back to Anne's house, and before dinner, Guy took a walk in the garden. He saw the black shape of a man. It was Bruno. Guy hit him hard, and they both fell to the ground. But Bruno was very strong, and his hands went towards Guy's throat. Guy wanted to kill him. He pushed Bruno into the grass, fighting hard. Suddenly, Bruno said, "Guy, you knew it was me." "I'll kill you the next time I find you here," Guy shouted. "Oh, Guy, kill me if you want to," Bruno said, laughing. "But are you ready to kill my father?" "I'm ready to call the police," Guy said. "And I'm ready to tell Anne about you and Miriam, and then to tell the police." There was a red light in Bruno's eyes. He looked like a hungry animal. "I'll write to Anne tonight, Guy, unless you tell me you're going to murder my father." He turned and ran away. Now Guy was frightened. He waited for Bruno's letter to Anne to arrive. He knew he couldn't stop it. What could he say to her about the murder? He did want Miriam dead. He didn't stop Bruno killing her. He was guilty too, and his guilt was growing stronger. A few days later, Anne phoned Guy. Her voice was shaking, and Guy knew what had happened. "I've had a letter, Guy," she said. "Oh?" He tried to be calm. "A letter?" "There's no name on the letter, Guy," she said. "It says you knew about Miriam's murder." "I don't understand, Anne," he said. "I don't know—" "Guy, I won't tell anyone," Anne said. "But what's happening?" "Nothing's happening, Anne," Guy said, and thought his voice sounded strange. "Can I see you tonight? We'll talk about it." "No, I can't," Anne said. Guy felt he was losing her, and that Bruno was everywhere. Then Guy realized something more. He had started lying to Anne.